reporting speech is one way to inform the public that there is news that has been put by journalists, both directly and indirectly. Also, reporting speech can be published by print media like newspaper and electronic media like the news that we can always watch in TV or internet. The next is kind of reporting speech. Number one, direct speech or direct quotes. Direct speech is word that heard directly from speaking person. Direct speech show a person's exact words. Quotation marks are assigned the words that person used. Example of direct speech is the exhibition finished last week, explained James. She said today's lesson is on presentation. He asked, why are you studying English? Where is the post office? Asked the stranger. The speaker said, be quiet and listen to my words. She said to me, please wait here till I return.
Okay, next I will explain to you about how to report direct speech. I have some tips about it. The first, when you quote person for the first time, introduce them before the quote. For example, John Smith, the leader of council, said, of course, I refuse to resign. Because the quote is a complete sentence, it introduced by a colon and starts with capital letters. The full stop comes before the second quote mark. And the second, subject to hostile, you can use says instead said. So the example, John Smith, the leader of council, says, I refuse to resign. The third, subject to hostile, you can use the short form council leader. So it becomes, council leader John Smith says, I refuse to resign. The fourth letter in the story variation is possible either he said, I have done nothing wrong, or I have done nothing wrong, he said. Because the quote is a complete sentence, the comma comes before the second quote mark, replacing the full stop in the original. The fifth, where the quote is longer than the sentence, put he said either before the quote or after the first complete sentence, not at the end of the quote. So, I'm baffled by the accusation, he said. In fact, I can't see what all the fuss is about. Sixth, in features but not in use, you might break the sentence for effect. I'm baffled, he said, shaking his head by the accusation. Seventh, where a quote continues for more than a paragraph, repeat the quote marks before each new quote paragraph. So it becomes, I'm baffled by the accusation, he said. In fact, I can't see what all the fuss is about. I really don't know what to do about the terrible mess I seem to be in. There is no closing quote mark after the word about. Okay, the next. In general, avoid inverting Smith and said and never write said Smith, I refuse to resign. Unacceptable use of inversion where Smith follows the quote and in turn is followed by an explanatory phrase or clause. So, for example, I will never resign, said Smith, who has been leader of council for 10 years. And then you might want to quote particular word or phrase. So it becomes, he described himself as really baffled. Note that here, because the quote is not a complete sentence, the full stop comes after the quote mark. A word of warning, don't litter your copy with bitty quote. In general, try to quote a complete sentence. And the next is 4 quotes within quotes use double quote mark inside single and vice versa. For example, he said, "I really meant to say I'm sorry." And he said, "I really meant to say I'm sorry." Note that both cases a comma rather than a colon introduce the second in close quote. And the last is use a new paragraph when you quote a person for the first time. Okay, there is some tips about how to report direct speech. I will tell you about the definition of indirect speech, or we can say as reported speech. Indirect speech or reported speech is words heard from speaking person but then was taken over others to be passed or is reported to third person with utterance that sound similar or same but the them a meaning and its aim make an unchanged. The example of indirect speech is 1. James explained the exhibition had finished the preceding week. The second, today's lesson is on presentation, she said. The third, he asked me why I was studying English. The fourth, the stranger asked where the post office was. The next, he urged them to be quiet and listen to them. And the last, she asked me to wait there till she returned.
And next, there are 7 how to report indirect speech. 1. The traditional way of reporting speech indirectly is to move more tenses one stage back. For example, I support electoral reform because he said he had support electoral reform. This traditional style has clear advantage that succeeding paragraphs in appropriate tense are clearly identified as reported speech. 2. Journalists increasingly use he says instead he said in reported speech, even in news stories. For example, I support electoral reform because he says he supports electoral reform. But remember that he said must be used in reporting set speech events such as speeches, public meetings, or courts. And 3. Advantage of he say over he said is there is no difficult distinguishing between the present I support electoral reform and the past I supported electoral reform. The tense remain the same in reported speech. 4. Unless there is a good reason, don't mix your tense. Don't write he said in one sentence and he thinks in the next. And 5. Don't write speaking at the meeting the speaker said. Instead, write the speaking told the meeting blah blah blah. 6. Don't follow the passion of always leaving that out. Leave it out where the subject remains the same. 7. And be careful with punctuation because it could mean several different things. And the last is main point of reporting speech. There are 3 main points. 1. In general, when speakers say things are nonsensical, obscure, or ambiguous, report their words indirectly, telling the reader what they intended to say. 2. Don't be afraid of repeating he says or he said on the story. Above all, be careful with plain, pointed. Use them only where they are accurate and add weight or color on your story. 3. Avoid efforts such as wryly to signal jokes. If his joke is good enough, the reader will not need to be nudged, and if it is not, the nudging makes the joke fall flatter.